Aperture, f-stop, depth of field, bokeh. What does that all mean and what do they have to do with each other? Well, hang around and we're going to talk about that today. Welcome back to Rediscovering Photography. Today we're going to talk about aperture and how it affects your pictures and how you may want to control it. I'm going to show you some examples of a couple of different lenses. We'll talk about fast lens versus slow lens, costs, why you might want to use one or the other. And then we'll head out into the field, take some pictures, bring them back here, throw them into Lightroom, and take a look at the results and see how controlling your aperture controls your pictures. So aperture is simply the opening in the front of the lens. That's the aperture, so the glass right there. Aperture and f-stop are often used interchangeably, and they're not actually the same thing. Aperture is the opening. F-stop is the relation of that opening to the focal length of the lens. It's a ratio. It's simply the focal length of the lens divided by the size of the aperture. So if you have a 50 millimeter lens like this, and you have a 25 millimeter opening, that's going to be f2. If you have a 12.5 meter opening, that's going to be f4. And one of the things to keep in mind is each full f-stop doubles or halves the light. If you go from f2 to f4, you're getting half the light to the picture. You go from f4 to f2, you're getting twice the light. F-stop is, or aperture, is one of the legs of the exposure triangle, the other two being shutter speed and ISO. Each setting controls a particular aspect of your picture. In the case of aperture, it controls the depth of field in your picture. Depth of field meaning how much of the picture is in focus. Remember, your eyes are an amazing mechanism. They're able to focus infinitely without thinking about it. They're able to see true three-dimension, where a camera actually is a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional image. So everything in a picture resides at the same plane. Even though your eye, when you look at it, your mind figures out, oh, that wall is behind the person that we took the picture of. Still, if you look at it, they look like they're sitting right on top of each other. Often you want to have your particular subject jump out at the picture and be the thing that grabs your eye. In portrait photography, in particular, you want the model to be the absolute point of focus. With depth of field, you can control that. Let's say you're out in a busy street and you're taking a picture of somebody and there's cars going by in the background. If you, like as often as the first thing that comes to people's mind is you want everything in the picture in focus. So you set a very small f-stop to get a large depth of field and you take your picture. You're going to see your model and the person will be in perfect focus, but so will everything else. And if you have a busy background, that person is just going to disappear into the background. Now, of course, you'll be able to see the person, but it's not going to be the subject that just jumps out at you and you say, oh, that's what the picture was of. Now, if you take that same picture and you set a large f-stop, let's say f1.4, 1.2, you're going to have a very shallow depth of field, the background is going to tend to blur away, and that person is going to jump out of the picture at you. That blurring of the background, that's called bokeh. It's a new term I just learned. I never heard it before. Bokeh. And that's the blurring of the background, whether it's more or less. And often you're going to aesthetically decide how much blurring you want. For example, let's say you have a person standing in front of a fountain, and you'd like that fountain to be apparent but not be the focus. You can set a largish f-stop, say more like about f2, f2.8, which will partially blur out the fountain, but yet it'll be obvious it's still a fountain, and that person will still jump out at you, but you'll have the nice effect of the fountain in the background. Let's look at a couple examples of lenses. I've already held this one up. This is my Sigma 50 millimeter for my M50, the one I'm shooting the video with right now. This is an f1.4 lens, and this is the 28 millimeter macro lens I have for the same camera. This is an f3.5 lens. Now you can see there's a significant difference in size, and I can tell you there is a big difference in the weight. This is probably easily, I would estimate, 3 times the weight of this one. And along with that size and weight increase, you have another thing to consider. Faster the lens, the more money it costs. For example, I just got these prices off of Canon's website this morning. A 50 millimeter f1.8 lens, which I believe is one of their kit lenses, is $126. An f1.4, a little bit faster, but not that much more, is $350. But if you want to go with the f1.2, now you're going to pay $1,400 for it. So buying a faster lens, and when I say faster or slower, that refers to the size of the opening. Typically, a lens that's f2.8, f3.5, like this lens here, would be considered a slow lens. F1.4 like this would be considered a fast lens. And by faster and slower, that means the amount of light it lets in. A faster lens will allow you to have a faster shutter speed, for example, in lower light. So it allows you to take the picture faster. Just like a telescope. A telescope, the larger the primary on a telescope, the fainter the object you can see. A faster telescope. Now, last time around I told you I spend a lot of time on the used market. This Sigma lens from my M50, new, if I remember correctly, is about $750. I paid, I believe it was just short of $200 for this on eBay. It's in perfect shape, came with the hood and the lens covers in perfect shape. So once again, if you're looking to get a little bit better equipment, don't be afraid of the used market. There's also a place out there that deals strictly in used equipment, a little bit higher price, but by the same token, you get a guarantee with them. There's a place called KEH, KEH.com. They have a broad range of equipment, and they've got everything from bargain basement up to like new, and with a price spread to match. So I guess that really covers what I wanted to talk about here before we go out and shoot. So let's go ahead and head out and take a couple of pictures, and we'll come back here and put them in Lightroom and see the results. So see you in a bit. Well, I'm here at Victoria Gardens in Rancho Cucamonga, and I found this nice rose here that I'd like to shoot. But if you look, it's a very busy background. And if we try to shoot it like everybody would normally shoot it, with everything in focus, the rose is just going to fall into the background and kind of lose definition. So I'm going to start off by shooting this at f/16. By the way, I am in aperture priority today. Just rather than take the time to do everything manual, I'm just going to let the camera decide the shutter speed. So I've got it set at f/16, which is the most I can stop down this lens. This is a Sigma 50mm 1.4 lens. And I mean, yeah, you can make out the rose in this shot, but there's an awful lot distracting from the rose. So let's stop it down a little bit and see if we can bring the rose a little bit more into the foreground. So I'm going to open it up a little bit. Now let's open it up to f/8. So that's a little better. The rose is now more of the focal point of the camera. And but I think we can do better. Now this lens will open up quite a ways to 1.4, which is a fairly fast lens, as we discussed earlier. So let's see what we can do now. And that's what we want. This has got the rose being the only thing you're really seeing. Now, one of the things that is a little bit odd about this is the closer you get to the subject, the more the bokeh is gonna stand out. So I'm gonna take a closer shot, a close-up of this rose, and let's see what it looks like. And that's perfect. That's what I'm looking for. You can still see that there's objects in the background. There's a building. There's some stuff that you can make out. But the rose is the subject. So, and by the way, I have to apologize for the background noise. When I got down here this morning, we've got somebody over here steam cleaning sidewalk and benches and stuff. So please forgive me for the noise. So let's try. I do have my macro lens with me. So I'm going to go ahead and change lenses, and let's get a real close-up shot and see what the difference that makes is. So I'm going to turn this off for a second while I get the lenses swapped, and I'll be right back. Okay, so this is a Canon 28 to 105 millimeter lens, and it's also a macro. Now this one will only stop down to 3.5, but I think with the macro added in, I think that's gonna be plenty sufficient. So let me get as close to this as I can, and let's see what it looks like. You know what? I actually like the shot with the 50 millimeter lens better. The f/3.5 is just not open enough to really bring out the rose like that 50 millimeter does. We'll go through all of these when I get back, and we can put this all into Lightroom and take a look at what we got so you can see what I'm seeing. This is just one example of what you can do. There's portrait shots that you can make the person really pop out, and yet have something like, for example, a fountain or what have you in the background that blurs out but yet gives a lot of artistic feel to it. Anyway, let me get everything packed up. We'll head back, and I'll put all of this into Lightroom, and we'll take a look and see what it looks like. So see you in a bit. Okay, so we're now in Lightroom. And as you can see, I've imported the shots I took this morning into a collection. And I'm not going to do editing on it today. I'll tell you right now, I'm a Lightroom beginner. I don't know a lot about Lightroom. I'm still learning. So let's just look at previews as they came out of the camera. So here's the first shot I took. You can see from the information up here was 1/100th of a second at f16 ISO 400. It's a reasonable shot. I mean, there's the rose I wanted to get, but this is an awfully distracting background. Not exactly what I wanted. Let's go back to grid view. So here's the next shot I took. And as you can see, this was 1/500th of a second at f8. And I increased the ISO to 400 just to reduce the camera shake a little bit. So you can see that the background is starting to blur out a little bit, and the rose now stands a little bit more individual, so that it's out there, it's presenting itself. But that's still awfully distracting. So let's look at the third one I took. Now this was at 1/8,000th of a second at f1.4. And as you can see now, the background is not really distracting at all, and the rose is just popping right out of the picture. This is what you can do with your f-stop. But if you remember correctly, I took one more after that, or I got a little bit closer, and that's this one. And notice how the background, because I'm closer, the bokeh effect and the depth of field is much more shallow. That rose is now just popping out of the picture at you. And honestly, if you didn't know where I was, you might have trouble figuring out what that background even is. So that's with a fast lens. Now remember, I got out my macro lens, and this is at 1/1000th of a second, f3.5 at ISO 200. And this pretty much looks about like the f8 did on the previous lens on the 50 millimeter. Now I did try to get a little closer to see if maybe that might help a little bit. And this was about as close as I could get for the environment. I mean, it's a decent picture, but you can see what a difference going from f3.5 to f1.4 makes in this particular circumstance. Now remember, this isn't always what you want. If you were to do a landscape, like a big mountain scene or something along those lines, this isn't what you would want. You would want to grab everything from the foreground to the background and get all the layers of the picture to get that grand view of everything. When you're trying to emphasize a particular element in the picture, that's when you want to do this. So anyway, there you go. So this is the f3.5. Now let's go back to the f1.4. Quite a bit of difference. I like this one much better. Now, I will admit, this is not a very well framed picture, but that wasn't what I was going after today. Mostly I was going after playing with the aperture, getting refamiliarizing myself with what the pictures feel like at the different apertures. So there you go. That's what we came up with for today. So let's go back to the studio, and we'll get some closing comments in. Well, that's it for this episode. I hope you got something good out of it. One thing I want to mention is I kind of made it sound like the shallow depth of field or bokeh is the be all and end all of photography, and it's not. It has its place. There are also circumstances where you do want to have everything in the picture in focus. For example, landscape photography. You want to get the majestic view, let's say, of a mountain scene or a lush valley or something like that. You want to get all the depth of field you can to get the foreground and the background and everything into focus and get that beautiful scenery. So adjust your aperture according to what you're shooting. Take the time and look. One of the things I do recommend that you'll find me recommending throughout the rest of the episodes is try to shoot on manual when you can. I understand there are circumstances where some of the automatic modes serve a purpose. For example, sports photography, automobile races, wildlife photography, such as shooting birds in flight, things like that. You certainly can use the advantage of getting that quick shot off. But if you're taking shots that give you the time to think about what you're doing, go on manual. Learn how your camera works fully. Like today, I got to admit, I shot an aperture priority. That was just a time-saving device, so you didn't have to wait for me to fiddle around with all the settings. But normally, I do shoot manual. So there you go. Next time, we're going to work on shutter speed and what you can do with that. And got a couple of interesting places to go, take some nice shots, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for taking the time to watch my video, and I hope to see you on down the way. Thanks a lot.